There is a woman in Nagoya who cleaned her entire apartment on a Sunday afternoon. Floors, surfaces, every visible inch, and still felt the same quiet weight in her chest the moment she walked back into it that evening. The apartment was not dirty. That was not the problem. The problem was that everywhere she looked, something was still waiting for her to make a decision about it. An envelope she had not opened. A blouse returned from the dry cleaner that still needed to be hung, not draped over the chair where it had been sitting for 4 days. A cracked mug she kept meaning to either glue or throw away, and had done neither. Each object was small. Each object on its own was nothing. But each one was also, in a very specific sense, an open tab. A small, unfinished thing that her mind registered every single time her eyes passed over it, whether she consciously noticed or not. This is why a home can be cleaned and still feel heavy. And it is also why some Japanese homes carry a particular lightness even when they are small, ordinary, and far from architecturally impressive. The lightness is not primarily about how few things are in the room. It is about how few of those things are sitting in a temporary state. And somewhere else right now, someone is standing in a home that looks, by any conventional measure, reasonably tidy. Floors clear, dishes done, cushions straight, and still feeling the specific fatigue of a space that is quietly asking something of them. They assume this feeling means they need to own less. They assume the solution is minimalism, fewer possessions, emptier shelves, the aesthetic they have seen in photographs of Japanese interiors, pale wood, sliding doors, a single vase, nothing on the counters. What if the calm those interiors produce has almost nothing to do with how little is in them? And what if it has everything to do with something far less visible, a small set of systems that most homes, Japanese or otherwise, either have or don't, and that determine whether an object, once it enters a room, ever actually finds a place to rest? By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what those systems are, and the one most people overlook entirely, the treatment of empty space itself as something with a job to do, is the one that, once seen, changes how every other room in the house is read. Stay with me, because the systems build on each other, and the last one is the reason the first 5 hold. Before the systems themselves, there is a concept worth naming, because once it has a name, it becomes something that can actually be addressed rather than something vaguely felt and privately blamed on a lack of discipline. Researchers who study cognitive load have a term for what happens when a task is started but not finished: the open loop. Psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik documented, nearly a century ago, that the human mind holds unfinished tasks in active memory far more persistently than completed ones, that an interrupted or incomplete action continues to draw a small, continuous share of attention until it is either finished or consciously released. Her original observation came from watching waiters in a Vienna cafe who could recall the details of an unpaid order with total precision, and then, the moment the bill was settled, forget it almost entirely. The order, once closed, simply stopped costing anything to hold in mind. A home filled with open loops, the unhung blouse, the unglued mug, the unopened envelope, is a home making the same low-grade demand on its occupant's attention that a browser window with 40 tabs open makes on a mind trying to focus on one of them. The tabs do not need to be actively read to cost something. They only need to still be open. This is precisely why a home can look tidy in a photograph and still feel unfinished to the person standing inside it. A photograph cannot capture which of the objects it shows are resting and which are waiting. This is not a discipline problem. It is a friction and infrastructure problem, and Japan's domestic tradition, largely without naming it this way, has spent generations engineering that friction down to almost nothing. The first system addresses the point where clutter almost always begins: the door. She arrives home carrying her phone, her keys, the mail, a coat, a bag, sometimes a coffee cup, sometimes something that belongs to someone else in the household. She does not want to organize anything in that moment. She wants to put everything down. If there is no designated place near the entrance for these objects to land, the nearest table, counter, or chair becomes the landing zone by default. And once one object has claimed that surface, a second and third follow, until the table meant for eating has quietly become a storage shelf for unresolved decisions. The genkan, the small transitional space at a Japanese entrance, physically distinct from the rest of the home, solves this by design rather than by discipline. A tray for keys, a hook for the coat worn daily, a basket for anything that needs to leave the house again, a library book, a return, something borrowed. None of this requires an elaborate cabinet or a large hallway. It requires only that the decision about where these objects go has already been made, once, in advance, so that the tired version of the person arriving home each evening is not required to renegotiate the question every single time. But a landing zone that exists is not automatically a landing zone that gets used. It must be genuinely easier to reach than the wrong place. Dr. B.J. Fogg's research on behavior design at Stanford has documented this precisely. When the correct action requires more steps than the convenient one wins on any day where energy is limited, which is most days. A coat hook by the door beats a coat hanger inside a closet, not because the closet is a bad idea in principle, but because the hook requires one motion and the closet requires four. The chair the coat lands on instead is not evidence of laziness. It is evidence that the system asked for more effort than the moment had available. The second system extends the same logic to every object used daily rather than occasionally. There is, in almost every home, one item that is chronically found in the wrong place. A coat over a chair, shoes in the hallway, a bag on the floor by the sofa. The instinctive response is to resolve to try harder next time. Put it away immediately, be more disciplined. But Fogg's research on friction applies here with the same force it applied at the door. An object used daily needs a home that can be reached and returned to in a single motion, or the single motion of leaving it in the wrong place will consistently win. Consider the specific mechanics of what putting the coat away properly actually requires in most Western homes. Open the closet door, locate a free hanger among several that may be tangled together. Position the coat on the hanger correctly, find space among the other garments already hanging there, and close the door again. 5 distinct motions. Dropping the coat on the nearest chair requires 1. No amount of resolving to try harder changes this arithmetic on the evenings when the day has already used up most of what a person had to give. In Japanese domestic organization, frequently touched objects are rarely stored behind a closed door with a lid to remove. They live in open baskets, on visible hooks, on shallow trays, accessible in one step, returnable in one step. A child's daily toys go into a single open bin rather than a set of small labeled containers with lids that must each be matched and closed. Clothes worn once but not yet needing a wash get their own hook, separate from both the closet and the laundry basket, rather than defaulting to the chair, because no third category was ever created for them. The chair that keeps collecting a coat is not the true problem. It is a stand-in for a missing one-step home. Once that home exists, a hook at the exact height and location the coat is naturally dropped, the chair stops being asked to perform a job it was never suited for, and stops accumulating the small resentment of a person who keeps meaning to fix something that was never really about effort in the first place. The third system returns to the concept introduced earlier, and gives it concrete boundaries rather than leaving it as an abstract source of quiet fatigue. A container without its matching lid. An item bought in error that still needs returning. A chair with a loose leg that has been getting fixed soon for 11 months. None of these create a dramatic pile. They sit quietly in a drawer, a corner, a shelf, and precisely because no final decision has been made about them, they continue to register, faintly, every time they are seen. The Japanese approach to this category is architectural rather than emotional. Gather every broken or undecided object into a single, bounded space, one small box, nothing more, rather than allowing them to scatter across a kitchen drawer, a bedroom shelf, and a corner of the garage. The box itself becomes the limit. When it is full, one item must be repaired or released before another is added. Dr. Robert Cialdini's research on commitment and follow-through offers a mechanism for the second half of this system. Vague intentions, I'll deal with it eventually, almost never convert into action, while specific dated intentions, I will glue this on Saturday morning, convert at dramatically higher rates. The specificity does the work that willpower alone cannot. An object without a date attached to its resolution is, in practice, an object that has already been kept indefinitely. It simply has not been named as such yet. The chair with the loose leg that has been getting fixed soon for 11 months was never actually waiting for a Saturday. It was waiting for someone to admit that no Saturday had ever been named, and that the absence of a date was doing the same work as a decision to keep it forever, without anyone having consciously made that decision at all. This is the system most people overlook entirely, the one that, once seen, changes how every other room in the house reads. Here is why it matters more than it first appears to. In most homes, an empty surface feels like wasted space, and the instinct is to fill it. A basket, a candle, a stack of books, a framed photograph. There is nothing wrong with any single decorative object. But when every surface in a room has been filled this way, the room no longer has anywhere left to actually be used. Where does food get prepared if the counter is covered in decorative jars? Where do shopping bags land if the entry table is already occupied by a curated arrangement? Where do clothes get folded if the flat surface nearest the wardrobe is permanently a display shelf? There is a specific irony in how this usually happens. The empty surface is filled precisely because emptiness felt uncomfortable. The bare counter, the blank table, read as incomplete or unfinished, in a way the decorative objects were meant to resolve. But the discomfort of an empty surface, and the discomfort of a surface that can no longer perform its actual function, are not the same discomfort, and treating the first with more objects quietly creates the second. The counter stops looking unfinished and starts being unusable, and the second problem is considerably harder to notice because it does not look like clutter in the conventional sense. It looks, from a photograph, like a nicely decorated room. The Japanese concept of the deliberate, intentional emptiness discussed elsewhere in this series in the context of attention and rest, applies with equal force to physical space. An empty counter is not a failure of decoration. It is working space, held in reserve for the activity the room actually exists to support. Protecting one section of counter, one section of floor near the entrance, one clear surface near the wardrobe, is not about achieving a minimalist photograph. It is about ensuring the room has somewhere left to do its job when a real task, cooking, arriving home, folding laundry, actually needs to happen. When an object keeps returning to a surface that was meant to stay clear, the instinct is usually to remove it again and again. The more useful question is different. Which landing zone, from system 1 or 2, is missing, such that this object has nowhere else to go but here? The fifth system addresses the objects that are not visible in daily life at all, the ones behind the cabinet door that gets opened reluctantly. Shopping bags, empty boxes kept for shipping, old cables, spare containers, a device no one quite remembers the purpose of. Each one is kept for a reason that sounds entirely reasonable in isolation. It might be needed. The difficulty is not any single object. The difficulty is that, might be needed, has no natural limit, and without one, the space required today is gradually surrendered to dozens of low-probability futures. Every time the cabinet is opened for the one thing genuinely needed, several other things must be lifted, pushed aside, or shuffled to reach it, a small, repeated tax on a task that should take seconds. Over months, this tax compounds into a specific kind of quiet avoidance. The cabinet becomes the one place in the house nobody wants to open, not because anything inside it is unpleasant, but because navigating it has become its own small chore. The Japanese solution here is not to eliminate the category, but to bound it. Not a search for the perfect number of cables or bags to keep, a fixed container, one drawer, one box, that defines the maximum. As long as the category fits inside its container, the system holds. When it no longer fits, the correct response is not a larger container. It is a review of what is actually being kept, and why. The review itself is simple, and can be done in minutes rather than hours. Match every lid to its container, and set aside anything left unpaired. Match every cable to a device still owned and in use, and check that duplicate spares still correspond to products currently in the home. What remains after the match is what earns the space. What does not match anything current is, almost by definition, the answer to why the drawer no longer closes properly. This same bounding principle extends naturally to anything with an expiration date, medication, skincare, pantry staples, where the danger is rarely a visible pile, but a quiet accumulation behind newer items, requiring a label check every time something is needed. A fixed seasonal review, once or twice a year, replaces the impossible task of remembering continuously. The sixth system addresses a category of object that has, in principle, already been decided about, and yet somehow still occupies the house. The shirt set aside for donation that has been sitting on a chair for 3 weeks. The item that needs returning to a shop, resting by the door with no further momentum. The book borrowed from a friend, still on the kitchen counter a month later. These objects are not undecided. The decision that they should leave has already been made. What is missing is not willpower. It is a path. Notice the specific quality of this category, because it is different from the open loop addressed in System 3. An open loop is an unmade decision, the mug not yet glued, the envelope not yet opened. The outgoing object has already cleared that stage. Someone decided, at some point, that it should go, and yet it remains, because the decision to release something and the physical act of its departure are two separate events, and most homes have no bridge connecting them. The shirt does not walk itself to the donation center. The library book does not return itself. Without a designated, visible holding point specifically for departure, these already decided objects simply rejoin the general population of things sitting in the house, indistinguishable at a glance from everything that has not yet been decided about at all. A basket near the entrance, dedicated entirely to outgoing items, connected to a routine that already exists in the week, the Saturday errand, the regular grocery trip, closes this gap without requiring new discipline. When an item carries a deadline, the receipt or return slip goes into the basket alongside it, and a single reminder is added to a calendar already in use rather than trusted to memory. The decision was made once. The system's only remaining job is to carry that decision to its conclusion, the way a river carries something to the sea, rather than asking the object to travel there on its own. The final system is the one that makes the previous 6 sustainable, because it addresses not individual objects but the rooms that hold them. A bedroom asked to be a place for sleep, a home office, a viewing room, a laundry folding station, and a catch-all storage space simultaneously will struggle to feel restful in any of those roles. This does not require eliminating every competing use, particularly in smaller homes where a single room genuinely must serve several purposes. It requires protecting one primary role and giving every competing activity a clear closing action that returns the room to it. If rest is the bedroom's primary role, the question becomes what is competing with it at the end of the day. A laptop left open on the bed, a phone charging within arm's reach of the pillow, a chair holding an ambiguous mixture of clean. None of these require a dramatic renovation to resolve, only a specific closing sequence. The laptop returned to a drawer, the phone charging somewhere that requires standing up to reach, the chair's 3 categories of clothing separated into their own one-step homes from System 2. Sleep researchers have long documented the relationship between environmental cues and sleep onset. A bedroom whose primary visual and functional signals are consistent with rest falls asleep faster than one whose signals are mixed. A mind arriving in a room that is simultaneously an office, a laundry station, and a viewing room receives no single clear signal about what the room is currently for, and must do a small amount of unconscious sorting before it can settle. The closing sequence is not aesthetic. It is the room being returned, deliberately, to the one job it was protected to do, so that walking in at the end of the day requires no sorting at all. 7 systems. None of them require owning less. All of them require deciding, once, where things go, so the decision never has to be made again on the evening there is no energy left to make it. The landing zone at the threshold, so the tired version of the person arriving home is never asked to negotiate with the door. The one-step home for daily objects, so the coat on the chair stops being read as a failure of character and starts being read as a missing hook. The open loop, named and bounded, so the broken and undecided things in the house have one box rather than a dozen quiet corners. Empty space given a job, so the counter and the entryway floor stay available for the life that actually happens in them. The boundary around might need it someday, so the cabinet holds a fixed amount rather than an ever-expanding list of possible futures. The outgoing path, so decisions that have already been made are actually allowed to leave the house. And one room, one primary role, so the space that is supposed to hold rest is not quietly competing with 4 other jobs every night. The woman in Nagoya did not remove most of her belongings to feel the shift these 7 systems produced. She gave the objects she already owned somewhere to actually go. A tray, a hook, a basket, a box with a limit, a counter that stayed clear, a drawer with an edge, a bedroom that closes at the end of the day the way a shop closes its register. The apartment did not become emptier. It became a place where fewer things were left in between. Tonight, choose 3 small things. Give one chronically misplaced object a landing spot that takes less effort than the wrong place currently does. Close one open loop. The envelope, the return, the broken object you will finally either fix by a specific date or let go of. And clear one surface, protecting it for 7 days, not because emptiness looks better, but because that surface has a job waiting for it. If this changed the way you think about your own home, share it with someone who has cleaned all weekend and still walked back into a room that felt unfinished. They may not need fewer belongings. They may need somewhere for the ones they have to actually rest. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.